I want to get into the topic we talked about, muscle and women. And I've always been an athlete. I have always prioritized strength training and muscle building. I've never been afraid of lifting heavy weights. You know, women, you are not going to get bulky and big. You
Nope.
just aren't unless you're taking steroids. But we enter this perimenopause, menopausal age, and it's harder to keep that muscle on. Can you explain why? What is going on in our body that's causing that? And what are the benefits of muscle when it relates to insulin resistance and how it fits in with fasting?
Yeah, it's so many good questions. So, the first thing that I really want women to know, and this was the basic premise of the menopause reset, was that at 40, your ovaries are starting to go into retirement. Now, if you haven't had a baby by 40, don't freak out. You still got some years. But in general, at around 40, and it's sometimes happening a little bit earlier, like 35 now, what is happening is the ovaries are like, hey, I've only got a few eggs left. I'm going to wind down. You might get an egg 1 month. We might skip a month. Things start to become very sporadic. And the ovaries stop making as many sex hormones. And this takes about 10 to 15 years. That has been, as a 53-year-old, I'm like, oh, I wish somebody had like tapped me on the shoulder at 40 and said, just get ready because this is a decade-long journey. But the thing that we have to realize is that what's happening is that you still need to make sex hormones. So your ovaries have to hand the job over to another organ. And what it does is it hands it over to your adrenal glands. So the reason this is important is if you are over 40 and you're totally stressed out and you add fasting onto that, you're adding another stressor on there. And those two stressors are going to make the adrenals reach not only for glucose in muscles, but it can often reach for amino acid and start to break muscles down so that the adrenals can function properly to make sex hormones and to make cortisol. So the first thing you got to do if you're worried about losing muscle after 40 with fasting is you've got to make sure your adrenals are strong enough. And for me, I love the Dutch test. I think it'll tell you everything you need to know about all your hormones, but running a Dutch test is great. But also really, the stressful life you live at 45 will not work for you like it did at 25 and 35. That stress has to change. Your schedule has to change. Your mindfulness tools need to be improved. It's really profound how you can come running into 40 really healthy and you still have to make some adaptations. So that would be the first thing. And then there's nuance beyond that.
So, and it's funny because I used to row in high school, and my kids now row, and they're teenagers, and they'll do 3-hour practices and tell me what they're doing, and then I'll try to say, well, I did this morning on the rowing machine, but I tell them I can't do what you do. It will put me out.
Yeah.
When you talk about adrenals and the Dutch test, absolutely. But for those listening who are not getting tested, what are signs that they have adrenal fatigue, burnout? I know there's no such thing, but what are signs that their adrenals are suffering?
Yeah, such a good question. And I want to mimic back to you that's what happened to me. I mean, I was a competitive tennis player, and in my 40s, I was like, all of a sudden, like, I'm not going to run like I used to. I'm not going to push physically like I used to. And each time I listened a little more and I gave a little more balance to my body, I really, really improved. So yes, if you don't have the resources for a Dutch test, here's the most simple way to know your adrenals are not functioning well. And it's one I use through my 40s all the time. When you go from seated to standing, do you get dizzy? If you get dizzy, your adrenals have a part of them is making a hormone that controls blood pressure, and blood pressure can be controlled by sitting and standing. So if you go from a seated position to a standing position and you get dizzy, it's that those adrenals did not react quick enough. So there was a lag in there. So it's, to your point, it's not that the adrenals are fatigued. Let's be really clear on that. There's a whole team, there's an HPA axis, but that system isn't responding as quickly as it should be. Throughout all my 40s, this is what I used. Was if I stood up and I got dizzy, my brain went, oop, adrenals need some love. I'd pop on an adrenal supplement. I'd start saying no. I'd prioritize sleep. Those kind of things I really would look at. And then when the dizziness would go away, I'd be like, okay, let me try this again and see where I'm at. So I think that's the easiest test. It really is. And, there's other things like you struggle to fast, you struggle to get into ketosis. Fasting makes you, even low levels of fasting, 12 to 13 hours makes you feel horrible. But I really think the blood pressure test is the best one.